Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Rachel Ray Nutrish brand cat food of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka as soon as I saw her flooded Church of Asmodeus tramp stamp, I came and started farting.
And I am the black metal guy, aka Warden of the Beringian Corridor.
You were working on that one for like a solid 4 minutes before we went on.
It mutated beyond recognition.
You gotta just have some sort of like black metal title generator open in another tab before we do these. You know, black metal pseudonym generator. You know, something to help you.
Yeah, but that one's got a whole album concept. I mean, so does the Flooded Church of Asmodeus tramp stamp and Coming Farting. I mean, that's certainly an album, but
that's probably an album by Flooded Church of Asmodeus, actually. Oh God! All right, so we got a show, and more importantly, we got an announcement up front. This is actually important, guys. Don't skip past this one on your way to the first album. Actually pay attention to this. It's relevant to the nature of the show itself. So, ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you the celebs are at it again. And as many of you have perhaps expected over the past year and a half of completely absurd amounts of content we've delivered, we are going to be reducing our workload slightly. Terminus has been around for about a year and a half now and has slowly ballooned from its original proportions up to these monolithic 3-hour podcasts we're doing every week. And frankly, under both of our workloads and, you know...
To be fair, I think it started as a monolithic 3-hour podcast. The first few might have been over 2. But
the first few were like 2, and then it progressively got to 3 within like a couple months. It was grotesque what happened to this podcast. So basically, what we've decided to do is to basically reduce the amount of time per episode, mostly by reviewing fewer records. So we talked it through different permutations of how we could do this, and we didn't want to compromise on the depth or the detail that you guys have come to really like. You know, we could try doing as many records and kind of skimming over them, but we just don't want to do that. So we're going to be covering fewer records, making tighter episodes, and hopefully getting a little bit more work-life balance going. That being said, we are going to be taking some of that extra time and putting it toward new material for the patrons, who have been extremely patient so far with our admittedly relatively spotty and uneven track record when it comes to delivering bonus content. So,
however, stellar bonus content.
Stellar bonus content, truly
worth the wait,
the best.
Like the Flooded Church of Asmodeus tramp stamp.
I've been waiting so many years for a girl that understood my needs. So yeah, basically imagine this as, the main episodes, the public episodes are going to be shorter, but hopefully no less detailed, and just covering, 2.5-ish records per episode will open up our ability to maybe do some more news stuff, be a little bit looser with the content. And then we're also going to take some of that time and start making bonus content more consistently, as well as making some new kinds of bonus content that we're kind of excited to get into. So we just wanted to make that announcement up front. We have heard from many people in the past that the 3-hour episodes were daunting, but at a certain point we felt like we were responsible for outputting that amount of content.
We sort of set an absurd standard, and neither of us are quitters.
We refuse to compromise our retarded values, even as it destroyed our lives.
Our retarded and arbitrarily determined values. It's like,
we didn't
3 hours. That seems right.
We didn't want to disappoint our fan, But so basically, this episode's going to proceed as normal. We got 4 records tonight. 2 full lengths and a couple EPs. But then episodes are going to be shorter, a little bit more concise, but hopefully no less detailed when it comes to what's covered in it.
We'll do we'll do 2 big reviews and probably take the little bit at the front a little more seriously. Use that to cover some additional stuff on a more regular basis. So you'll still get your virtually 2-hour show. It's also, by the way, a independently assembled Terminus index says that we've recovered 285 bands.
that's
or maybe 285 records and like 10 or 15 fewer bands than that because we've repeated a few.
Jesus Christ, I haven't even seen that. You're going to have to show that to me.
I haven't told you about it yet. I just decided I should let you know. Yeah.
Oh, well, then fuck it. I don't feel guilty about this move at all anymore. Let's get on to the show. All right, but before we get on to the show, social media. Me, the Death Metal Guy on Facebook at Terminus Podcast, or the Black Metal Guy on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. And then, coming off the heels of me telling you we're going to make less content, I'm going to say you should give us more money. And the way you can do that is by supporting us on either Patreon or Subscribestar. $3 and up gets you access to all of our Terminus Prime bonus content, and like I said, very soon there's going to be a lot more of that more consistently available. $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server. And just recently instituted, $10 and up gets you access to voting privileges to decide what records or what themes or what have you we're going to cover in a lot of those bonus episodes. So, with that being said, our last full Terminus for at least a long while, and the Black Metal Guy gets to start this one off. So what have you got, man?
All right, yeah, our format tonight is kind of like appetizers then main course. So two significant EPs and then 2 full lengths. And everything today is pretty, in its own way, pretty straightforward, foot to the floor ugliness. So we're starting out with a vial of Putrid Hockle by Odious Hiss on Hotchin Pit Records, which I believe is run out of the Instagram of a guy named what is it? Let me double check. Something about worms and ash and shit. Let's
see. Ash.
Oh, Ashworm. Ashworm. There you go. So the a very, very cult Instagram only label, but it, although some of his, I think the last tape demo is distributed in a few other places, but this is, as you may have guessed, the thing we call raw tape black. However, the key distinction from other raw tape black is that it is good, and we will discuss why.
Excellent. So next up, our second little hors d'oeuvre before we get to our larger records. This is coming from some personal friends of mine, some guys that I'm pretty close to, actually. This is the new EP by Merciless Scum titled Archon, which is getting a tape release on Void Wanderer Productions in January and is available digitally on Bandcamp now. Merciless Scum is a blackened grindcore band in a very pure sense. Do not get this confused with black crust or anything like that. This is a surprisingly pure fusion of the two styles that does some things pretty differently than you might be anticipating. Then after our interlude, we will be coming back with the new record by Kaeck, Zwarte Dictaat. The CD is out on Folter Records, and the cassette is out on, of all things, Hessian Firm. People who are really into Dutch black metal may have heard of Kaeck, or more likely the related band Samoth, where 2 of the Kaeck members are from. This is an interesting record that we're going to have a lot to talk about. But if you like your black metal fun and enthusiastic and full of big hooks to get you excited to drink beer, this is exactly the wrong record for you in what may be one of the most dour releases we've covered this year.
Yes, and I love it. And now, finally, the good news is, if you like your black metal fun, full of hooks, and great to drink beer with your buddies with, and also sort of like do cocaine and crash cars, not that we would ever condone that. This is Nightmare Lord by Morgal on Werewolf Records. Morgal sounds like the name. That is a retarded version of Morgoth. And it is it's incredible. It's just sort of blasting speed metal with the massive sugary hooks you've come to expect from Finnish black metal, but like delivered in a way you've never heard or even imagined. All right. And we're off with a Vial of Putrid Hockle by Odious Hiss out on Hotchin Pit. Almost said Odious Piss, but it was a slip of the tongue. And Hockle, I assume that's just some sort of meaning. It looks like spit. Something that has been hocked up. So, a vial of putrid spit. A lot of the song titles here are very potion-y. The aesthetic seems to be wretched medieval peasant magic. This is raw tape black that I found thanks to Pure Fucking Armageddon, I believe his name is, on Twitter, or not Twitter, Instagram. God, no, not Twitter, Instagram. Jesus.
That's the future, man. Is raw Twitter black metal.
I can only imagine. I'm sure it's there. He's got a Instagram account, and he posted the first demo, Adherence to the Forbidden Divination, and I had not heard about this, but apparently it is one of the most in-demand demos of the year, I was like, what the hell, let's check in with the tape scene, or rather the specific raw tape black scene. And it was quite good. I had been listening to some abrasive post-punk right before then, which wasn't very good. But then I put this on, and for a minute I was like, shit, that record just got good. And then I realized I changed records. So, and what that also says is that the Adherence to the Forbidden Divination sounded a lot like very aggressive post-punk. So the stuff is formatted squarely in the sort of stompy heathen black metal tradition that comes out of Legion Blowtown, which has spawned so many offshoots. Now also, a lot of Russian bands like that Leshy all kind of has a continuity with the Legion Blowtown scene. This is but this variant is more noise driven, less burly, more goth than oi, although the oi subtext is still there for sure. And it struck me over the head, sort of like instead of just generically evenly noisy production or an unpleasant guitar tone, right? It has sort of powerful, blown out noise guitar, right? Making these sort of big, ugly waves of sound, and had a good, music adjacency, right? So, this particular demo is a lot closer to metal. And so what did you make of it?
This was an interesting one. As far as stuff that we've covered this year, This actually reminds me a little bit of that Glimped that we heard earlier this year. That would have been like probably February this year. They did the split with Vampirska. It was that British band that kind of leaned into this interesting industrial direction. Reminded me a little bit of that. But what this really reminds me of, and I guess my thesis for this, is that it transcends raw tape black because it is not raw tape black. It is raw CDR black from the 2000s. This reminds me a lot of just obscure, no-name CDR demo stuff that I would pick up from distros like Rusty Axe Records back in the day. The kind of stuff that you got for like $2 or $3. It was not, for profit. It's like friends of the label owner who gave him 10 copies of it just when they were hanging out one time, and he threw it on the distro. And I loved collecting stuff like that. I loved poring over these like badly scissor-cut, inkjet printed inserts stuffed into slimline CDR cases limited to 33 copies apiece. I love that shit so much. It's kind of similar to what's happening now with the tape stuff, except back then you didn't get to sell your CDR for $200 on Discogs after a few months. But the energy I get off this is a lot closer to that kind of vibe, where it was just music made for one guy or his circle of friends. There wasn't really a profit motivation, and it was concentrated on being weird and not just duplicating the tropes of the style. Because, for instance, what you're not going to hear on
back
this record,
then, it had zero social capital, right?
And you were not a cool guy.
Capital attached to this stuff, right?
You were not a cool guy for collecting black metal CDR demos back then. Maybe you are now. Fuck if I know. So what you're not going to hear is like any Seigneur Valand riffs, which is, what 90% of this raw tape black shit is cut and paste out of. You'll hear a little bit of mutilation, just kind of in the execution of everything, but do the melodies really sound like it? Not really. It's not even especially riff-based music, even though there are these really big, vital riffs that the songs are built around. These strike me as songs that are structured a little bit more like industrial songs than they are black metal songs in the typical sense.
That makes sense. And there's also a very honest use of drum machine. So you get some just like solid, cool sounding, understated double pedal drum machine rolls and things, which would be very no in the standard sort of vampiric or other subgenres of raw tape black, right?
Yeah.
It's in general, I totally agree with you that this actually sounds much older. It has a kind of real eccentricity that is different from a virally transmitted manner, and it is. And the influence is just, they're not, it is not Vothana worship. It's not trying to sound like, I don't know, what is it, fucking Eisenwinter or the most effete parts of mutilation. And it's, like the mutilation in it would be like Ravens of My Funeral, right? Mm-hmm. The sort of really punky, ugly mutilation. So let's get into one of my samples, and I'll try to get to some other kind of bigger early 2000s tendencies here. So one thing I'll lead with in terms of the sort of the thing that you get now that you wouldn't so much back then, right, is this kind of gothiness to the music that persists. And if anything, it's more gothy now, like less sort of just like. It's more concertedly gothy. The melodies are darker, right? But it's very focused on these sort of echoing single string leads, but they have a real definite shape to them. They're non-interchangeable. They're worth listening to, and they're often pretty much always doubled by a rhythm line that follows them very closely, but often with like very dissonant chords, just like dragging fourth power chords along or tritones or something. You'll hear that it kind of sounds like the ringing, drawn-out leads on the first Christian Death record. But there are a few... So let's listen to it with that in mind, and then we'll get into some more metal stuff. This is 1,000 Cut Maelstrom from about a minute and a half in. Okay, so we just faded out over this kind of squalling single-string noise guitar solo, right? The main riff continues, and the other guitar is just sort of going wow over it, right?
It's designed for you.
Yes.
This hole that was made for me.
Note free, or one note. Yeah, that's the kind of soloing you get on the and kind of like, I mean, certainly in something like Christian Death, you get, or in I don't know, like Susie and the Banshees, kind of wild, so, like, guitar fry sound. Bauhaus for sure in the flat field has that kind of vibe. Any number of recordings from like the British bands, but like in the underlying melodic sensibility, you can hear that, and there were maybe like 2 or 3 variations on that melody there, but you can only remember that one kind of core version of it. It kind of just slips into these other variations from that time. The mood there is very Christian Death. It's like you took away all the sensuous darkness from Only Theater of Pain, all like the fun gothy parts that make people like that album, and you just kept the undertone of sort of like grit and paranoid misery. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you were saying, you know, you've got that basic riff, the hummable version of it, basically, and he's going through these different kind of mutations of it. But most of these songs are really only based on one, maybe two distinct riffs. There's a lot of variation going on in the guitar, but it's not in the form of additional riffs. It just comes in these kind of subtle mutations. And then the riffs themselves tend to kind of at their root be based off of like a very simple kind of black metal stem melody. The kind of thing you're going to be familiar with from other bands, but usually chorded or harmonized in a really weird way. And that what's interesting there at that turn when that squalling lead guitar comes in, there is a weird kind of like semitone shift that happens in the rhythm guitar. Kind of syncing up with it, or they're weaving in and out of dissonance with each other.
Something like that.
Yeah, there's something very interesting that happens there. It's like I get the sense that it's like it's sculpted from improvisation, but then what's happening is very careful when it's actually recorded.
Yeah, that makes sense, because there's a very, like, in moments like that, it's almost like a single guy imitating full band playing. The solo goes out, and then the rhythm guitar starts, like, the rhythm guitar kind of follows it, right?
So either it's plotted out, or he's just doing a lot of takes over and over with those leads.
And he must at some point, right? There's very clearly defined points of, like, if you listen casually, like just now as I was listening, right, it just sort of these changes slip by you, right? If you're listening carefully, you can pinpoint them, like, okay, here's a new variation. But for him playing, he clearly has, like, okay, this one is, we're going to do 8 reps of this variation, it's going to start here, you can tell that. But it must be hard to remember. Like, there's a real subtlety to the writing. Like, he probably jams it first, plans it out, and then it's a matter of, like, being like, wait, was I doing that one with the 3 notes on the end, or the 2 notes on? Did it go up or down at the end there?
I think it's probably a process where it's like he's got an idea of kind of a skeletal structure. For the riffs, he plans out the drum machine, and then he starts exploring variations on the riffs, just kind of vamping over that drum machine loop.
It really is proof, though, that if you are imaginative, he can have fewer riffs than a ton of other people making music of this, relative minimalism, because he's sort of musical and inventive, right? You have, like, why not have one riff per song if it's a good riff and you know how to create meaningful variation on it? Right?
Well, I really appreciate the quality of this music, where it's like aesthetically this lines up with modern raw tape black, but you don't get the sense that this is a guy who feels in any way beholden to what else is happening in the scene.
No, so that is a nice segue. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about with that sample. It's, in terms of, like, what it initially hit me as sounding like, God, I mean, the general vibe. So it's like the earliest stirrings of the scene, of part of the scene that became the tape underground today, right? It's a little bit, it doesn't sound at all like Bonal, but it sounds like bands that kind of orbited around that or became relevant because of it. I've mentioned this once or twice on the show because it's just kind of singular. And there are really only a couple songs on it that are good, but there's a demo by a band called Stella Polaris that Aesop put on Cosmic Hearse years ago.
Oh yeah, the Quebecois one, right?
Yeah, it's got some guys leading a goat, and it just sounds, it's the idea of vile, noisy, oi black metal, right? But it sounds totally different from what's a lot of the codification of that. This has that kind of just, like, very intuitive bulldozer feel, but the music's a lot subtler. It also sounds like black metal, things that had more cultural currency in the raw black underground of the CDR days.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, specifically, like, the way that a lot of cool things... Like, last episode we were talking about how, like, a lot of cool cult Japanese black metal from that era, like Hakuja or Endless Dismal Moan, was kind of DSBM adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or, like, if you were listening to, like, Burzum-y stuff, like Vigrid, it sounded kind of like DSBM. Right?
Yeah.
This is... This sounds like... kind of like early Catatonia. The Christian deathy parts have the same kind of... The melody lines are like the kind of, the bleak melodic parts on Brave Murder Day or something.
Yeah, I get that. The whole melodic design of this record is kind of interesting.
Yeah, at times when it moves towards more elaborate metally stuff, or gestures towards more conventional kind of glorious Dorian scale stuff, it can sound like the really early Dark Tranquility stuff, not because it's technical at all or death metal-y at all, but just because it's based purely on two very thin intertwining lead lines.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, throughout, it maintains this atmosphere of, like, scrapey nastiness, right? And yet there's a constant undertone of sort of noble barbarism to it. Like, you can hear how this relates to, like, white metal or whatever.
Yeah.
And it kind of... It's an interesting thing. If the theme is medieval witchcraft or something, you can hear, oh, this is a remnant of a bygone pagan culture or something. And the other influence that's got to be big here is I think he just, like, actually listens to Burzum.
I love how that's become like a meaningful qualifying statement on our metal podcast.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, but I love how it's become vanishingly rare that people listen to Burzum as music rather than as like cultural iconography.
And yes, and listen to Burzum as anything other than like philosophim.
Yeah, like actually listening to the self-titled and like thinking about the riffs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so speaking of melodic configuration, so I'm going to get to my sample. This is coming from the last track, Boiling Wretched Cordial. And this one has, I think, the most distinct and most interesting riff on the record. So this is a song that's basically all built around a single riff, and it's a really weird one. And like I said, it's based off of like a kind of a conventional Dorian scale black metal stem melody, like, you know, the building block of a lot of things you've heard, but it's chorded super weirdly, and the lead guitar is harmonized in this really grotesque way with the riff itself. And you're also going to hear just like some of the weird skittering stuff that happens on the drum machine. One thing I appreciate about this is that this guy isn't afraid to like, oh, it's raw black metal. What, that can't have a groove? That can't have like a banging part? You know, God forbid. You know, there's a lot of that across this, which is one of the reasons it maintained my attention so well.
It's not conspicuously tough at all, but you can tell this guy listens to a lot of tough black metal and hardcore, right? You can thrash to this, and you know it would be cool to see a live version.
Oh, yeah. No, I think it would be cool to see this as an actual band. That would be a weird fucking show. So, Boiling Wretched Cordial, this is coming a couple minutes in, and this is, you know, in a section where the main riff kind of breaks down and then re-emerges. And then I'll talk about kind of the role of riffs as I see them in this music a little bit more. So across this record, like I said, there's interesting riffs. There's an interesting sense of melody and harmonization across this whole thing. But I've got the feel, I don't think that's really what the listener's supposed to stick around for, because a lot of them just kind of hover. They don't really progress in the narrative way of a regular black metal song. You get interested because of the riff, but you're staying for the texture that it provides. You know, it's...
some of us like the same thing over and over again.
I know. I like the same thing over and over again.
That's true. No, I know what you mean. To be fair, you were saying about the go somewhere, but like you can have a one riff song that goes somewhere in the way you're talking about, right? It has.
Well, what I'm saying is it doesn't go somewhere in the idea of like a narrative progression of riffs like a black metal song typically has. What it does is instead it explores a sort of closed room. It explores all the different kind of geometric angles and, you know, different locations within that room by mutating these riffs. I mean, really, in that whole passage, there's basically just one riff, but he contorts it in interesting kind of industrial ways where the guitars are switching roles, there's some slight reharmonization occurring, like at odd points throughout it. It's constructed in the way something like a Bloodos Nord song is constructed, which is also not very much like black metal as we understand it. But yeah, basically the point I was getting at was it's not so much about the riff as in the melodic contours of it, as much as the texture that it provides. You know, it's sort of like a tape loop in an industrial thing. Like when I was talking about neoplasia on our last episode. You take this loop, you extend it, you compress it, you add effects to it, you change where it pops up in the sound space, what you get is a complete experience, even though, like, bit by bit, just the fundamental building blocks are remaining fairly static.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think... another way you could put it is just like, although the riff, there is intrinsic interest to the riff. I agree with you that the riffs aren't the center of the attention here. It's certainly on the total effect and which is a very industrial thing, and the sheer sound quality, right? The noise. Another way you could describe it is like you said, like. It's like he writes riffs that are pretty well worked out, but they're playing the general role that just having chords there would do.
Yeah.
Like they're giving the thing a continuous tonal color that changes in semi-meaningful ways from song to song, right? It's pretty, the album has one sound, right? Actually, I was going to say that to your point about it not really progressing anywhere, when I was 8 minutes into the record and realized we were already in the middle of Cat Carcass Filled with Vial, a great song title. Like the songs, it really, the whole thing actually really sounds like one long song.
Well, the middle two songs in particular, Cat Carcass ends with a riff which Parasites in a Blistered Mouth basically starts with an augmentation of exactly that same riff.
Yeah, but even from Thousand Cut Maelstrom into Cat Carcass, it's like the riffs are so cut from the same cloth that like it just rolls on. So it does have that intense continuity. So really, it's like it's like a lesser band could have produced this general color just by using chords, and then would have had to go on and or certain very basic repeating riffs, and that just mark out a harmonic territory, and then would have had to provide some sort of additional interest in various ways, right? With the noise and stuff. And it's like he's put so much effort into creating that harmonic template that if you zoom in on it, or if you listen carefully, you're like, oh my god, there's like a bunch of riffs here.
Yeah. And I think that, I guess my kind of closing thoughts are, you know, we've talked a lot on this show about the idea of a British black metal sound, and how, you know, over the years it never really congealed into something specific. But after covering stuff like this, Glemt, let's see, Oppress, definitely, Eisensker, who I'm somehow starting to come around on in some weird way.
Ooh.
And like Spider God, who I know I'm more of a fan of than you are.
But
it
it's
does
definitely
feel like
in the school.
There's a thing emerging. And the Legion Blotan stuff and stuff that you're better acquainted with.
So Legion of Blotan and Eisensker are older, but you could see them as roots of this thing.
This idea of like a new paradigm, in a sense, of raw black metal, of what it means to be that. And these certain like continuous thematic and sort of atmospheric elements that are binding all of them together.
Yeah. And it being kind of very independent from all those bands, sort of very independent from heavy metal in general. Like, what's remarkable about this band is, if anything, although texturally and sonically, it's even further into just sounding like goth or noisy punk or whatever, right? It has these sort of gestures towards these sort of more 90s metal ideas. I like this a lot, and I like it even more after talking about it with you. It's like, you know, I might even attempt to find a copy, except and I look at the YouTube comments thread, and it's already filled with a flame war about Big Cartel.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
Alright, we are back with our second record of the evening. This time we have Archon, the second EP by Merciless Scum. The cassette, like I said up front, is coming out on Void Wanderer Productions, and the digital release is independent, available by the band now. Full disclosure up top, these guys are very close friends of mine. I've probably played 24 shows with them with my own band. I saw them last week play this EP in full, sort of an album release show type thing, and I believe I shared a practice space with them for about a year at one point, so suffice to say I'm not coming from an objective standpoint here, but... so real quick, so Merciless Scum has been around for a little while, about 5, maybe 6 years now, and their initial incarnation was as a pretty pure grindcore band, but definitely on the metal side, very kind of galvanized and metallic, heavily reminiscent of Nasum. I think that was by far the primary influence, as well as stuff like Wormrot, maybe some Insect Warfare, Watchmaker, stuff like that. Definitely on the riffy side more than the noisy side. Then band kind of went dormant for a while. There were some lineup changes, and they came back, but this time is sort of with a black metal inflection. So this is being described as blackened grindcore, which can mean a lot to a lot of different people. The first thing that it brings to mind is something like black crust, which is a terrible thing, which this is not.
Yes, Terminus opposes blackened crust.
we oppose just about anything with the crust suffix, except for crust. You know.
Except for actual crust punk, yeah, exactly.
Exactly, which is a vanishingly rare commodity these days. So basically, what we have with this EP, with this new version of the band, is this remarkably pure blending of the influences that were present before. You know, that sort of like modern metallic grindcore, but with a pretty straight up black metal set of riffs. You know. What I hear, I was talking to the guys about this the other night, I hear a lot of like old Enthroned and like old Melichesh, but I think a lot of these ideas probably just come from like Emperor and Dark Funeral and more straightforward stuff like that. So what's really interesting is that there's no attempt to join the genres in the manner of something like old Anal Nathrok. This is not like noisy grind, and Wilkins agrees with me, apparently.
Energetically.
Yeah, this is... Oh my god, Wilkins, come on, get over here. All right, I got to hold it.
Wilkins says an Al-Nathrak jumped the shark after a few albums.
They jumped the shark after the first one. Yeah, yeah. It's all about the Codex Necro. But anyway, so basically what you have
Codex
is...
Necro's good. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, that's still a great record. Eschaton has its moments, too.
I listened to Hell is Empty a lot, but I think that was sort of an entry-level thing for me.
They're still fun. I'm just not going to ever, listen to it.
It's like Behemoth. Yeah.
If a friend puts it on, that's fine. So anyway, basically what you get is a set of sort of traditional modern black metal riffs laid over this rhythmic foundation of pretty pure aggressive grindcore. And that has interesting effects on both parts of that equation. These sort of traditional black metal riffs get sort of mutated and deformed by these really aggressive kind of neck-snapping rhythms that they're played over. And the drumming performance gets this interesting inflection from these more dramatic melodic ideas. I think that it's still kind of a transitional work. I was talking to the guys, this is kind of a compilation of songs written on their own, just kind of getting an EP together to kind of present the new idea. But I think there's a lot of interesting source material here that could lead to some pretty novel ideas down the road. It's just a very different take on the sort of black grind thing compared to what you typically hear, just from that description. So what did you think of this one?
I like it. Okay, I would say I think I'm a bigger fan of where it's heading than where it's at.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
It's it is sort of like black grind. It is sort of like black grind, independent of the whole blackened crust pastiche notion. A good idea, yeah, sure. And I like some of those old bands you mentioned, I'd be kind of interested to hear they sound more like Codex Necro, or Watchmaker, a band who I've literally never listened to but can tell are good.
Watchmaker is sick. You should definitely go back to that.
I was thinking when I was listening to this, I was like, I wonder if this is a watch related to Watchmaker. And so yeah, they're one of those places that's been filled. You know how on the map with thumbtacks and shit. I have a thumbtack for them, but but anyway, so black grind, good. Like the stuff we were talking about with Odious his early 2000s in a good way. I think we both agree that this record gets a lot stronger as it goes on.
Absolutely, yeah. The strongest songs. I think it picks up at about track 3. I think you think it really picks up at track 4.
And I think 4 and 5 are much better than track 3. Yeah, I mean, I think, and, it's hard to, this is a really short record, right? So it's it's sort of, it's almost not enough sample size to really judge. I think if we were to judge this as heading towards the direction on the Aphotic Eye and Archon, then I like it, but I think maybe some more development of the kinds of black metal riffing would help, and just the sort of... Well, we'll get into it when we get to the samples. I guess here, I'll play a sample.
Yeah, sure.
So, a thing that sort of makes this stand out to me and makes it unique. It's okay, this is sort of doing black metal ideas, but done in a way that can only be done with this grindcore inflection. This song is good at using sort of steady blasting in the black metal vein to create sort of rhythmic grinding effects that you can really only, make with grindcore, right? Particularly look for, in this sample, the 8th note archgoat blast, which mostly crops up in war metal, of course, but this isn't really a war metal record. This is like black grind without the war metal at all.
This is a much older kind of idea of black grind.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, yeah, so you heard at the end they were doing that sort of staggered archgoat blast and basically made a hook out of it.
Yeah.
With sort of, the riffing synced to the vocal in a...
Yeah, like a version of that happens on Lawless Ichor also, I think, the third track.
Word, yeah. Well, that's a good idea, right? It's kind of like a gesture that's... It's one of those things that often comes across as poppy, right? Not necessarily in a bad way, but it can just also reflect, like, good writing. And the interesting thing happening there is that sample is almost all even continuum of blasting with this kind of churning riff stuff that probably has 3 riffs in it with somewhat different harmonic qualities in it, too. I think the last riff is a little more epic sounding. But, it's just a thing you could only get with this particular synthesis. And the idea that there's no, like, marker for the hook part, it just happens as part of this stream of pummeling blasting, which I think is also unique and a really good idea.
I think that's... I get where you're getting at. I think that a lot of the significance of certain moments on this song rests on the way these kind of grindcore rhythmic configurations alter the riffs. The way they kind of have to play catch up at the end of phrases. You know, these kind of... There's an interesting thing that, like, dedicated grindcore bands do. It's like they kind of wax and wane. They, like, speed up at the end of phrases, and, you know, they wane a little bit and draw it out a little bit in the middle. You know, there's this subtle kind of, like, meta swing feel to everything, which is obviously completely different from black metal. So.
Yes, there's a lot more expansion and contraction and sort of ironically, musicality to the way grind bands play with rhythm than you get in default black metal. And I think black metal in general could learn a lot from that. But yeah, so I think there's an interesting thing going on where, like, you've got a continual stream for about a minute and a half, a continual stream of trem riffing and blast beats. But it kind of moves at the grind things are being used to make it move at a mid-tempo, and it has these fluctuating rhythmic effects throughout it, this sort of, like, changing pulse that you wouldn't get in BM. So that's cool. Another thing I want to say about this is there's a kind of big ballsy riff at the beginning of that sample that's played open chords. It sounds kind of like a Blashirk Mighty Ravendark riff or something, right?
Yeah.
Or a High on Fire riff, right? It comes, they're the same picture. And there's a riff like that at the beginning of the record too. It's or let's see, it's not on the. Is it on the? No, there's an intro track here, so it's the first riff on Chalice of Styx. But this band is quite good at writing just, like, big ballsy riffs that have some harmonic nuance to them, and that play on the massive low-end brick guitar tone that you wouldn't get in black metal, right?
Yeah, they rely on that tone to kind of carry the significance.
But why aren't they blasting those? Like, make those the main riff. Like, those are really good. And I think it might have something to do with grind conventions of a certain kind. I'm wondering, like, is there a convention where if a grind song is mostly these, you know, certain kinds of, like, blasty parts or hardcore breakdowns, right? When you want to pull in a hook or something, do you make it one of these sort of big, kind of chest-thumping, open-up moments in the music? Like where you go to, like, half-time or quarter-time?
I think it kind of is. I think that's coming from the grind DNA. You know, the idea of dropping in, like, turning your hook into a mosh section specifically.
Yeah, but you can't really mosh to those parts. Those are like sludgy in a way that like grind band things on the hardcore spectrum would do, but metal bands wouldn't.
That's fair. You know, I think that part of it is a desire to just create more variation, because, you know, a lot of this music is based off these extended blast passages. Like you said, you've got this kind of just solid brick of a guitar tone. I feel like this is the kind of band where just when you're operating under these kind of parameters, you need to exaggerate certain features, you know, to get them to stand out more, to you know, kind of like, you know, be provocative, get the people going, so to speak. So, but I get what you're saying. I think that there are rearrangements that could be made, because I think, like you're saying, a lot of those hook riffs end up being some of the coolest riffs just from like an isolated guitar perspective on the record, and maybe those should be centered more.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, and you know, partly it's just learning auditory conventions in a new genre. Okay, in grind you flag it by doing it as the big sludgy thing, but surely you might also throw it in the middle of the song in a grind song, right? Like you have the big sludgy thing in the middle of the song and it's kind of like the chorus. In black metal you flag something by playing it with blast beats a lot of times. It's and another note on the brick-like guitar tone. It's the right direction, but as it is, everything on this, I don't mind at all hearing a record where everything kind of blends together, and what you get is mostly just pulsations, and you have to like listen more closely to discern the melody. That's totally fine, but I think maybe in an attempt to avoid that, they've made it quite quiet. So it's like really huge and blown out, but very quiet. And so I've listened to it on speakers fairly loud. I just listened to it on good headphones. And it's still hard to make things out, and it doesn't make me want to put my head through a wall.
Yeah, I think that that's an attempt to... It's one of those things where it's like good production impulses almost operate counterintuitively, because it's like this kind of stuff, it's like you kind of want it to clip a little bit, you know, you kind of want it to be excessive.
Doesn't Nasum clip?
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ, yeah, they do. It's like,
I think you want immortal clips.
Yeah, I think some more clipping on this. I would rarely say that, but it's like, brick wall the fuck out of this. Just normalize past this whole thing.
You will never be one of us. Brick wall the fuck out of it, and like, I think if the fear is that those big riffs will lose distinction, trimmed and brick walled, no, just do it anyway. We'll do the legwork for you.
Yeah, just make it fucking louder and more brackish.
Make the people come to you. If it's really loud and the sick riffs are there, it won't matter. The people can't hear them instantly.
Treat it like a Benum record or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let me give you my sample. This is going to be off the title track, Archon. And this is going to be a really good example of what I think are the best parts of this, which is that weird, as you said, expand, contract, whiplash effect at the end of phrases. So you're going to hear a sequence of riffs that are generally like traditional black metal riff configurations, you know, augmented a little bit with, you know, the grindcore guitar that's still in there. But what you're going to hear is the way these riffs are timed out. They're already timed out in interesting ways, but that gets so exaggerated by the incredibly like abrupt snapping kind of nature of the drum performance here. And what you get is something that feels very alive and very organic. It's almost like excessive full band energy when it's played like this, you know? So let's listen to about the first half of Archon. So that I feel is the level of aggression where this all really comes together. You know, just these rivers of blast beats and really aggressive kind of traditional Norse tremolo riffs just spilling over each other. You know. And I think you could probably hear kind of subtly at the end of the phrases, you know, you got your kind of guitar fill at the end of the riff phrase, and then it has the double time to catch up with the drums because it snapped into a fill like almost too quickly. And that energy, that's where the whole idea of the grindcore and the black metal really comes together for me, is the way these kind of conventional riff forms just mutate into something really weird and interesting under the weight of just this constant, like, ceaseless motion from the drums.
Yeah. And they can just sort of... I mean, the continued variation within stream of blast beats is just a really good thing. A good tool. Like, and the impulse to change the riff... Well, just the impulse to change the riff and keep blasting is very 90s, right? I mean, I was just listening to Dawn or Nidden, that's what they do, right? It's just like, why stop, right?
No, but, the blast beat, that's the fundamental unit of this music. Why would I ever stop doing that?
Exactly, yeah, but that's the part that sounds sick, right? But this band can do that with a lot more rhythmic punctuation, right? And that is cool. They can produce effects that are kind of like the Slayer beat or punk beat driven parts of verses, but just by blasting. You know what? These guys should listen. I feel like in terms of things that it would be good for this band to, I'm sure they listen to, but like things that seem highly relevant to what they're doing, the early Inquisition records.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know that at least one member was a big fan of the older Inquisition stuff. But I think that you're definitely right, that just, like, river of, like, spilling, kind of writhing blast beats.
Yeah, kind of slow, droning blast beats, which with occasional moments of just, like, whiplash rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Inquisition also provides a pattern for, like, how to make those kind of sludgy parts stand out amidst all that as well.
Yeah, and this band can do that sort of thing with a lot more fluidity and kind of absent the mystic drone quality, right? Just make it more like classic metal and grind, in-your-face excitement, right? I mean, I consider Inquisition exciting, but you know what I mean, right?
No, I know. They're exciting, but in
a different way.
You have to have the taste for that already to find it exciting.
Yes, exactly. It's incredibly, it's deliberately rigid and hypnotic, right? Whereas this can be sort of snaky,
liquid, and supposed to be specifically like warm and kind of frothing. I think that, you know, I've got, because I see like multiple paths forward for this band. You know, it's like this, okay, so this is a transitional record. This is the first one with the new lineup and kind of the new style. So where does it evolve from here? I'm thinking that maybe like putting even more import on the riffs, because there's a lot of interesting kind of Phrygian black metal ideas. Like I keep going back to like old Melodic for some reason, which I don't know if that was a substantial influence here, but just some of those kind of slinky riffs but then played way too quickly and aggressively. I like that idea, and I almost like the idea of, you know, the guitarist you know, like writing a song riff by riff, bringing it to the drummer, just telling the drummer to go and just trying to keep up on guitar. You know, like the more they exaggerate that whiplash effect and those really pronounced kind of rhythmic stabs that they're so good at, I feel like that's where the heart of the sound here is. right, and we are back with, God, what may be one of the most, like I said up front, possibly the most dour record we've ever covered on the show, with Kaeck's Het Zwarte Dictaat on Folter Records and Hessian firm. Describing this music is a challenge. I could see some people calling this Black Doom, or the world's slowest war metal record, maybe.
I think the band did describe it as war metal via sort of like black metal guitar ideas.
Yeah. So Kaeck does a lot of things. A lot of this, really, I mean, you kind of have to speak by comparison. There's moments of this, especially in the faster parts, that remind us of Needham Division 187. The slower parts remind me a lot of Demon Sea, specifically. And the whole thing is wrapped together with with guitar work that is at once very simple, but extremely intuitive and very specialized. A lot of these riffs are very simple 3 or 4 chord arrangements, but harmonized in really interesting ways. But also never sacrificing the kind of like brute primeval quality of them. I don't know, man. I'm really having trouble trying to articulate what this is like. It's excellent. I think we both agree that it's fucking awesome, but
I think if you wanted a down the line description of it, I think slow Nidden is totally fair.
Yeah.
I've been re-listening to, and it's fresh for me because I actually was like, fuck, time to finally throw him a bone, so I bought Impergium and Judgment on Bandcamp, and I've listened to Impergium a lot, and A, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
B, like, I like it even more now than back then. But B, like, there's one quote-unquote slow part on it, which is actually a blisteringly fast double pedal bass roll, just kind of like 1 minor 3. Dun, 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 dun. Right, just before they, on one of those tracks. And so, like, that suggests the possibility of a slow Nidden. And just like if you took those songs and you cut the number of notes in half or less, like cut it to 1/3, and you slowed the tempo by 50%, you'd basically have this. Like, I think in some sense it has more to do with Nidden than anything else, because the harmonic sensibility and the mood uniting the whole thing is like Nidden, minus any of Nidden's gestures towards, sort of bleak romantic melody.
Yeah, there's no big triumphant moments. It's just the most churning moments of Needham.
Yeah, nothing will remind you of dawn. Right?
Well, so this is interesting. So a couple of the guys from this band are from Samoth, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but
I know how Samoth sounds, and I think I strongly approve. It's just one of those things I've never gotten around to checking out more.
Yeah, I had a couple Samoth records back in the day, which is much more kind of straightforward, very aggressive, kind of Marduk-inspired black metal.
Technically accomplished Marduk meets Kvist.
Yeah, something like that. Like without Marduk, without kind of the hooky moments. It's just it's very unfriendly music.
Sometimes with keys, right?
Yeah, occasionally keys, and there's some of that in here too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess an interesting thing that I thought is this is 1 second. God damn it! Hold on. Sorry, Moira gets in the cabinet under the sink and then won't push her head against the door to get out of it, so she'll just poke it with her paw until I let her out.
Oh, that's very endearing.
Yeah, it's great. Anyway, so something I guess another comparison that I would make is a lot of this has a similar... it's hitting on similar ideas to some of this like gloomy ritualistic stuff that we've covered throughout the show. Stuff like Serpent Trance, Upon the Altar, Cultum Interretum. But the aggregate effect of it is very different. The mood is very different, and the constituent influences are different.
Yeah, like, I heard the Cultum Interretum thing for sure. It's definitely like it's found its way to a similar outline as those things. Maybe it could only exist at the same time as them, but yeah, everything else about it is different.
Yeah, it's like I described the atmosphere of this record as being like a battlefield aftermath cleanup procedure. It's like pulling the corpses off of the battlefield after it's already happened. Like there's no moments of like glorious conflict. It's just like, God, this is miserable music in the best way possible.
There's a moment in Storm of Steel where Younger describes seeing something like a half decomposed corpse caught in the barbed wire, and it was the first time they're deployed, and so it's like he's like, yeah, this was horrifying and full of pathos, and then he was like, but after seeing a few of them, you get used to it.
This is the sound of getting used to it.
Yes.
Let's play him how this shit sounds, man. It's going to be very hard to talk about it without the samples to drive it.
So this is from Dictaat, which is the second track. It sounds kind of like the first track. This record has an intensely homogeneous sound, and we're going to have to point out very slight details to explain what makes each of these tracks stand out, but they do, I promise. This has an intensely craftsman-like hand behind, or not craftsman-like, because this has a intense craft to it. So let's go to Dictaat, about a minute in.
Man, imagine showing this record to like a normie and explaining how this is like actual music that you listen to in your spare time. They would call the police. It's like, please stop this man before he goes any further, you know?
Yeah, it's like, you know, you've and like, you know, you think there's like, I don't know, you know, you can have a feeling, oh, there's nothing shocking anymore or whatever, right? And it's true that much less shocking music is being produced now. That's not because you can't just reach out and make it. Right?
This is, even as jaded as we are, this is still, like, horrifying in a way.
Yeah. That's like what we were talking about with the Sorgwanasia, too. Kind of like, you could just make black metal this intense, but you don't. Right? And like, in some sense, this sound has been waiting for someone to reach out and grasp it since 1994, right? You'd need about 1994 for the harmonic palette to become possible, maybe 95. And then after that, right, it's just existed there. And what is it? Jan Kruitwagen had the he had the nerve to reach out and grasp it, right? So this is in that part, man, how do we break the thing is, right? It would be so easy to say, oh, it's just, we could even do a positive review, right? Say, it's just fucking, you know, the down-tuned guitars and the gloomy keys convey an emotion of despondency. Right? You know, but like, well, it's not despondent, as you said. It's much more just stoic. Right.
Well, it's like, but, you know what it is? Explaining what makes this special is like when I have to articulate what makes another brutal death record special.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So here, I'll take my whack at it. As it's first, let's talk about the end first, because that's fresher in your memory and also harder to tell apart. So there's a big rhythmic part, which we'll get into. And then there's a blasting part, right? Notable thing is, I can remember that riff now. I've listened to it a lot, but I can now remember the riff. Dum dum dum, bum dum dum bum. That is 3 chords. And that riff comes in. Then you get this big void in the song with keys. Mm-hmm. And then after the break, we drop into a blast riff that sounds enormous because it has 4. Dum, bum, bum, bum. Right? This guy is very patient. There's no anxiety about like, oh, do I need to change the note? Right? There's
never change the note.
No, this is the note, and it will remain until the riff repeats. Thank you. And it's and under it, it's got this like strange stammering drums. It's like he's playing like one of those kind of leaden core beats that you like, you know, like kind of like a Von Havahedge Profanatica kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's doing this sort of kicks, like one of those kind of like really rigid kick snare things, but it cashes out as a blast beat orally. I think. And it sounds like a blast part is dropped. And then when the first riff comes back with like proper 16th note blast, it's like da 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 da. It sounds like oh shit, it's so fast now. And so he creates the classic black metal effect of, you know, this is roughly the 2/3 stonker, right?
Yeah.
You are, or maybe midway through the song, but like you have the big dropout, and then suddenly a riff you haven't heard hits, and it's the big riff, and then oh my god, there's another big riff after it that it's the same riff as before, but it's so sick now, right? He does that. He does the like 2 riffs in the bag at the end of the song effect, and he does it with 1 new riff, and he does it with like 5 notes.
Something that's really important on this record, which we'll get into when I get to my sample, is the manipulation of time. Like,
yes.
The sense of time on this record is bizarre, which is weird to say because all of this is in 4/4. All of this is like remarkably, painfully straightforward music, but somehow you never feel like you've got a full grasp on it, because I think there's just like really abrupt full tempo changes. We're not talking about like double time into cut time or anything like that. We're talking about just like weird, like it's 30 BPM faster now. And part of that is like, I love how blast beats just happen on this record. Like there's no announcement, there's no like punctuation mark. They just kind of happen.
That kind of there's a really good example of that in that sample, right? You were on a thing that sounds like the blast beat because it was so crawling just before that, and then it's like, oh, we're back in the blast now, and it just like spills. It just like the feeling, it just sort of like smoothly sort of tips over the edge and drops. Right? You're just
it's got this profoundly nihilistic, like, arbitrary quality to it, you know? Mm-hmm. It's so much more sadistic than, like, making a big deal out of it would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just, and it, yes, that is cool. The other thing I want to talk about rhythmically, right, is, although the basic rhythmic, there's no fancy, there's no like, I don't know, 5/9 or whatever, right? But there's like a great subtle sense of rhythm in the playing, even just when they're doing the blasting stuff, right? That sort of transition from that strange halftime blast to the full-time blast, right, was very well managed. But also on the slow part at the beginning of that sample, right? That basically functions as the hook on the song. It's really heavy. It's got that flam on the drums. And that's got the sort of swaggering, kind of knuckle-dragging vibe we've identified in Australian bands a lot, like Samain and Mongrel's Cross have that. Mm-hmm. Neither of them are particularly knuckle-dragging. The band that knuckle-drags is Cauldron Black Ram. Does that.
Yeah, that's very Neanderthal.
Skullduggery. Ooga booga, right? But so this is definitely more on the ooga booga end of the spectrum, right? But these kind of like 3 against 4 flam things. Here the variation being that the default, even though you can count it in 4/4, where you can't say just like, okay, there's like 4 triplets, there's another 4 triplets, the basic shape of the riff is timed to like 8 sets of those. Mm-hmm. So instead of like, I don't know, 12/8, it's something, I don't know, I can't count that high.
There's like an abstract, like almost polyrhythmic quality sometimes.
I'm sorry, I'm the black metal guy. The highest I can count is 6. Yes, it's kind of it's like simple polyrhythm, and there's a lot of give and groove in it. The way they're just sort of like dragging those bass, just those little like flam parts at the end, which are also subdivided on the guitar, just drag it along at the end. And I was going to say, in terms of like tracing the genealogy of that very distinct thing, I've realized it might come from Absu. Okay. Specifically, like, certainly an influence on all those Australian bands with the sort of, like, Celtic barbarian meets thrash metal thing. But, like, particularly the early stuff, like Barathrum and the Son of Tifereth. And Barathrum's sound, extremely murky and cryptic, is, like... And both of those records have these kind of hovering static keys. That is that's something that like could at least be a general reference point here in terms of what it's like to create, what it would be to create music in this kind of esoteric early 90s vein. The other stuff would be like fucking like, I don't know, like Samael, early Samael.
Yeah, I get you. The most cryptic parts of kind of like mid-90s black metal.
Like Ceremony of Opposites or even the record before it. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, Barothrum Vitriol probably has my favorite black metal cover art of all time.
Oh, for sure. That's
oh my god, dude, it's the coolest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah, immediately Google that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so but back to Kaeck. Okay, so here's where I really want to make the case of Demoncy being an important thing. So Demoncy is one of the coolest bands on the planet. Joined in Darkness is one of the best black metal albums of all time, and it's been secretly very influential to a lot of cool people. I think it's a big part of this record. So, basically, I mean, there's a couple threads you could trace. A lot of these basic ideas could come from Demoncy, or they could come from Beherit. But the way these riffs are executed is very Demoncy. There's this, like, horrible weight and sluggishness to the way these kind of slides and bends are executed. Very simple, like, 3-chord configurations for a lot of these riffs, but all of the life is in the movement and the passing tones from one chord to another, and these like awful bends that last half a measure, stuff like that. So let's go to the title track, Zwarte Dictaat, which is a song that is basically just one goddamn riff, you know, played continuously, like agonizingly. It's so cool. I love how every time we try to describe this record, it sounds like we hate it, but no, this is actually one of the coolest records of the year, I think we can say. All right.
Oh, for sure. This is high year end for me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the sad thing is, this is the kind of thing I want to listen to regularly.
Oh, God. Please seek help, black metal guy.
I listened to more shit like this when I was younger. Do you remember? I'd just be listening to, like, hey, death metal guy, check out this album of sort of like grinding industrial dark throne worship by Italians. You know, like, I look back at some of the shit I listened to back in the day, and I'm like, I listened to that in the middle of the day?
How did I not kill myself?
Yes, how did I not kill myself? Exactly, yeah.
Also, so when we get to the sample, there's another thing I want to ask you about, which is something these guys do so well, which is something you oddly don't like on certain other albums, like that Ruin record we covered, which is the idea of these horrible liminal spaces of tempo, where everything's a little bit too slow or a little bit too fast from what it properly should be. But anyway, let's listen to just like smack dab in the middle of this ghoulish fucking track.
Let's look at the
So, like I said, that's basically one riff until you get the big stomping one at the end. So something interesting, something that's specific to Demon Sea, at least that's what I know them in particular best for, is the idea of like a very simple 3-chord riff, and you're starting and ending with the same chord, but the measure starts in the middle of that chord's being sustained. So you get this weird looping yet oddly off time effect because you're starting with like a half measure and then it loops back into the full thing as the riff repeats. It's a really simple technique, but it's one that's been kind of forgotten by a lot of bands now. And it just
You're thinking of the whoa, da, 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 riff.
It's the first iteration of that where it's just da da do da new measure da da like
yeah. Oh, that's a Darkthrone. That's like that's a Darkthrone thing.
Yeah, but like the specific way that it's like etched out, just with those like droning like open 8th note chords and stuff, is. Ugh, God! Like that's a very like Joined in Darkness by Demon Sea thing to do. Like half the riffs on that album are that specifically. It's.
I see what you mean. I just mean very pre-95 thing to do for sure.
Yeah. But what's fascinating is like the liminal spaces of tempo that this operates in. Like when that big riff at the end, that horrible like just like clanging down-picked thing at the end comes in, that's like way too long and way too weird, and it's played like 15 BPM too slow. Like that could be like an Archgoat like headbanger riff, but it's just awful. Instead, it's the worst feeling thing on the planet. It should be this moment of catharsis after all this tension's been built with those really chromatic previous riffs, but there is no release. It's just another horrible thing made out of the same chords.
Do you mean the
Yeah. You see, you're doing it too fast though, because it's
exactly. No, I know. I know. Yeah.
And you can feel like.
So I just hummed the Archgoat. I just hummed the Archgoat.
Yeah, you hum the Archgoat version. And it's like you can feel the whole band like almost doing that expansion contraction thing of like they know it's supposed to be faster, and you can hear them almost like hitch and stutter like. But no, we're sticking with this awful shambling ghoul of a riff that we have, and it's so fucking sick.
So I think in terms of I like it here, I mean in terms of if it were all like that, I probably wouldn't like it as much. One thing I really like about this record is it never, even in parts like that, it never loses momentum. You cannot... It's absolutely true that it drops into that section like it should be a headbanging thing. And when it first hits, it definitely is heavy. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, this riff. But I tried it. You certainly cannot headbang to it, right? But it does have a drive to it, partly in the way that you say it feels like it should be faster. Like, almost just the shape of the riff gives it drive.
And that's something across the whole record. It's filled with feelings like that. It's amazing how simple this music is, but you can never predict where a song is going, ever.
That's certainly true. That relates to that feeling of arbitrariness. Like, okay, this happened. But the, yes, a 50 BPM riff appeared. Right, but I think in terms of like the tempo thing of this versus Ruin, it's just like I just don't like this. So first of all, the riffs have some internal drive to them that I think often is not in the Ruin riffs. Ruin riffs have that kind of like flabby kind of like, but I think we described it as flesh on bone thing, or something like flesh hanging from the bone, which I get why it works as a death metal thing, but it doesn't.
in the like punk beat. For me, the real thing with the ruin is just that the punk beat parts or the characteristically punk beat to blast parts don't land rhythmically.
Yeah, I get it. It's just not your thing. Yeah,
yeah, and like maybe just I can't even say I always dislike slowed down skank beats because sometimes I do, right? And we all like coffins. Right?
Yeah, the masters of the slowed down.
Exactly. Who doesn't like coffins? Or as you were saying, Iljarn is very like much slower than you'd expect. So I think the weird tempos work here, and one reason they work really well is that there are also moments that just are viscerally gratifying. So like the blasting part before that is slower than you'd expect. But the slowness by like a lot, that's even slower than the Archgoat half blast, right? But it's the same principle being used to generate just this like devastating headbanging thing. And I'm like, you can dance to that part, and the dance is something like you are banging with both hands at once on the door to the dungeon, yelling to be let out, or you are banging with both hands at once on the gate to the castle, yelling to be let in, right? It's like, or arguably banging on the door to the dungeon, asking the guy in the dungeon to let you inside, and he's saying no. But yeah, that's a really good riff, and you can bang your head to that. And so there's just like there's a lot of pummeling heavy stuff on this record, in addition to the sort of deliberate, like that part isn't even the sloggiest part on this record, right? That award has to go to actually my next sample, Decabal. This is so the sample I've pulled is the moment of drama on a song that aside from this has one riff. And you will hear that riff, I can't remember, either at the beginning or end of this sample, maybe at the beginning. But, check this out. So then it just keeps going for the rest of the song. It's not even really like it fades out into ambient stuff. It really just is variations on one, I guess, like 7 sharp, like 1 7.5, 1 down a half step, minor 6. Like just the basic, like just sort of like the black metal chord progression, right? Just for the rest of the track.
So it's just looking it up, it's been 6 years since the last record. Mm-hmm. This record either took 6 years to make or it took 1 week. There's no in between. There's absolutely none.
I know what you mean. I'm going for 6 years, to be honest.
How do these guys know when a riff is done? You know what I mean? It's like, how do they know when it's like, yeah, we're going to use that one? You know, that like, you know why I love this so much? You can listen to this like it's Mortician.
You mean just in terms of, like, not caring about the riffs, or
the sort of like that feeling of like arbitrary sadism? You know, this is like spiritually kind of a death metal record in a way. You know, it's a like really weird, sadistic underground death metal. This has a lot of the same energy to me. I think that's one of the reasons I like it so much. It's like I just like ghoulishly laugh the whole time while listening. It's like it's so fucking evil. I mean,
it definitely converges with death metal a lot. I mean, if you'd put it out in the 90s, I think people might have said this sounded something like death metal, right?
Yeah.
But it's I think the thing that keeps it from being death metal is simply just the harmonies, which always have this sort of shades of Scandinavian black metal in them.
Yeah.
It's you know, always just this touch of the archaic or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, even just in that like big 1 minor 6 thing, right? That's epic, right? Haha.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's epic.
It is epic. Yeah.
You go to the one before, but the one that before it, especially, actually, I was like thinking as we went into it, right? Like this. So basically, like we get the stomp, right? And the stomp is played maybe is slightly faster than you'd expect. And is like one of the fastest parts on the record. Certainly, aside from the blasts, the fastest part on the record, and it's faster than some of the blasting. Right? That's one of the like moments of drama on the album. But then the thing that hits after it, they just go down to like the lowest note on the fretboard and hit like a 1 minor third. Jum, and the way they just draw it out, that's fucking epic. Relative to the tonalities of the things after it, and that kind of like gloomy, as you say, like scowling 1 minor 6 thing at the end. That part is epic. That's like a, you know, that's just the basic like Stooges riff or whatever. 1970, John. It's so that's that track.
Okay, well, to get to my last sample, something that we both tried to sample, this specific part, Sektorish Magi. So this is some more of the fast stuff on the record, and I don't even know how to describe what's going on. Well, I want to draw attention to a couple things. One, the vocal performance, which we haven't mentioned, which is just like, what the fuck, across this whole record. This like horribly ghoulish, like skeletal rasp and grumble, and then just these weird kind of Bethlehem high-pitched things will happen completely at random, not for punctuation of a specific moment. They just happen. And the production of this record, which is just so gray and flat and like compressed in an ugly way. Like, you have to dig the tonality out of the guitars. You have to think about the music just to hear riffs. You know what I mean? There's nothing welcoming about this music. But let's listen to... Okay, so this section kind of reminds me of a lot of, like, Bestial Burst related stuff. Like, it kind of reminds me of Anal Blasphemy, which, if anyone at home hasn't heard them, Anal Blasphemy is... like if Beharit and Archgoat were played by like evil people with Down syndrome in a basement in Finland.
So isn't that just Beharit and Archgoat?
Fair enough, let's play the sample. I feel bad.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
Bro, you fucking ready to get morged?
All day, brother.
Hell yeah. Alright, this is Nightmare Lord by Morgal, out, of course, on Werewolf Records. You know, we talk about records we listened to before this show came out and wanted to review, right before, like, Terminus existed, when it was but a twinkle in our mutual eyes. This is one of their last EP was one of those. From the first riff, I was like, this is the most gloriously retarded thing I've ever heard. I expected a full length sooner. I think that last one was 2019. It has finally, or 2018, that makes sense. It has finally wheeled around, and it's exactly what I hoped it would be. So how to describe Morgal? The basic format, I would say just sort of like blasting speed metal with the melodic sensibility of the most flamboyant parts of Satanic Warmaster or Sargeist, but like stripped down to like arpeggiated single string heavy metal riffs. That fair?
That's... Ladies and gentlemen, I've said this phrase before, but every other time I've said it on the show has merely been a preamble to this moment. The devil has the fastest motorcycle in the world. He has the biggest sunglasses, and he wants you to kick out the window that separates the front and back seats of the cop car and steal the cop car while you are still handcuffed.
Yes. He also wants you to always remember to use eye protection when using torches by the cave. That is, wear sunglasses.
He wants you to he wants you to freebase a lot of cocaine. He wants you to just shout in public. He wants you to talk too loud. You know, he when you're meeting new people, talk too loud and too fast when you introduce yourself.
Isn't that basically what we do all the time?
This is... Black Metal Guy, this is the single most ridiculous fucking record you've brought onto the show. We were talking, last night via text that it's like, you're supposed to bring on the Kaeck and I'm supposed to bring this on.
Yes. The kinky role reversal. It is, so often we joke about how I will cast aspersion on certain kinds of things that have taken the Satanic Warmaster sound and the Seigneur Valan sound, the sort of Franco-Finnish sound, and turned it into kind of like sugary pop music. Maybe mixed it up with a little Migla, maybe neatened up the production, whatever, right? This is, although it produces, it's easily as hooky as those bands, and in a way really far more hooky, it does so many other things differently, right? It's, for one thing, this is, it knows exactly what it's doing, right?
There's absolutely no question that this is intended to be party music.
This is intended to be as absurd and over-the-top as possible. Whereas there are tons of raw tape black bands who are playing these like big florid Vothana hooks or whatever without being Vothana, and making kind of stuff that is like elaborate pop music with bad production. and where there are tons of bands who are trying to make like big, beefy, like, yeah, leather jacket, get paid to play at a venue black metal, right? And it actually just sounds like sterile pop music. Mm-hmm. This band is trying to play massive, like, black heavy metal riffs stripped down to their barest essentials. They know that they're poppy, they know that they're hooks, and they're laughing at you as they do it. They're just cackling madly as they do this. And they take these things that are sort of shaped like big heavy metal hooks, and they make them just totally minimal. I was just saying on the Morgal EP, the riffing is actually more elaborate and closer kind of to Finn Black. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty, like, epic throughout. They maintain totally homogeneous, like, epic Dorian scale arpeggio the whole time without falter. This record has a lot of just, like, grinding, blasting black thrash stuff, and the hooks are, like, those riffs from the Morgal album, but, like, just, like, 4 notes. Totally stripped. There's like really just one hook riff. There's like 1 to 2 hook riffs, or like just one hook riff that has a bunch of variations on it throughout this album. And so they take this thing that's supposed to be like a catchy melody, and they give it this sort of elemental quality of like a Marduk riff or something.
Yeah, well, there's a ton of straight up like melodeth and power metal influence across this record. Because you were asking me something before we got on, and it's a totally fair question, which is this actually substantially influenced by Children of Bodom? And I'm like, yeah, probably, but I think the way that it accesses it is through mid-era Impaled Nazarene.
I was going to say, yeah.
Because not a lot of people remember that Alexi Laiho, the main guitarist from Children of Bodom, was in Impaled Nazarene for a couple years. He did the record Nile with them. But his influence in terms of riffcraft and the kind of, like, punky, extreme metal melodies that he liked reverberated through Impaled Nazarene even after he left. Like, that is, like, the big thing for me, is those mid-era, like Nile and All That You Fear, those kind of forgotten Impaled Nazarene records that are incredible all the way through. That feels like the generative, like, DNA for this music to me.
No, that's right. We did that bonus episode on Suomi Finland Perkele, and we were, we talked about how Imp Naz has basically been forgotten, right? When we were coming up, that was like the #1 Finnish black metal band. But now that Sargeist is like a household name, or Satanic Warmaster has moved from cult to like canonical, right? Like, that's no longer the case, and something like Imp Naz is now viewed as, uncool or something. I don't know. But like this bass, you could. If you described this record if you sort of went back in time to 2007 and described it as, it's like Imp Naz and Children of Bodom, but like really raw. They'd be like,
this would have been the biggest band in the world. Yes.
So in terms of first sample is The Golden Son of Satan.
Jesus Christ, that's the name of the song.
Like... Hello, this my Morgal. So yeah, in terms of the whole length of the song, that incredible chorus, right, which goes, "The golden son of Satan."
Fucking of course it does. Of course it does that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That happens 2 to 3 times, right? You only get the shout along too, and this is a 5.5 minute song, so it's actually reaching like normal black metal length. And what keeps it up is this like surprisingly high quality sort of classic black thrash riffing. That like switch to the downbeat riff in the middle is like neck snapping. It doesn't go slow at all. It just like flips around the blast beat to like daka daka daka, you know,
yeah, just that like beat inversion that you know drives the punk home.
Exactly, crushing beat inversion, punk and like Slayer, you know, criminally insane, you know, it's it does that. You pointed out there's a dropout and then a really like kind of sinister war metal-y arpeggio riff that you was like, that's Impnaz.
Yeah.
Or not arpeggio riff, trem riff, right? Kind of like, yeah, that's like the really searing parts of Suomi Finland Perkele or something. So there's a lot of really good, just fast grinding stuff here too, and the fast grinding energy doesn't relent even on the choruses.
No, there's this like hyper speed, continuous energy to this shit. I've been on a big like old European power metal kick lately, just like on my own listening, and it's amazing how much a lot of this lines up with that in terms of just like the just like everything should be at the peak all the time. There's no idea of like there's no valleys to this music. It's just one peak continuously. Like it's like we always say, it's like, well, we found the best thing. Why would we do anything else? You know?
So in terms of like, it is just the peak and sustaining that in a really effective way. The other thing that I think is like a base for this music that is forgotten is like, Niflheim is like a niche name for black thrash people. And I think people often are referring especially to the newer Niflheim stuff, which is like very entertaining, like hyper speed metal. The first Niflheim record has a picture of the devil on it, making symmetrical, muscly devil arms, and inverting the cross. And it is called Niflheim. And it has the... It's like almost like Morgal took the catchy energy of the later Niflheim, but none of the like intense riffiness in terms of like lots of notes all the time, none of the shred, right? But put those kind of like epic intervals in kind of the frame of bare bones early Niflheim. But if you want constant peak and total retarded, I thought we should take a listen to it's been years since I've heard this, but I loved it. Witch Fuck. All right. So you hear what I mean?
I love the idea that in 1995 they were like, yeah, black metal kind of fell apart after 91. Like, how are you doing tribute music to the past in 1995 for black metal? Jesus Christ, dude. I love it. That's a lot cooler than I remember Niflheim being, actually. Maybe I need to go back to them.
Well, you know, back when you're younger and you're more like, where are the catchy riffs, or where's the really unique sound? You know, it can be easy to be like, oh, well, I've heard that before. But the total retard energy is unreplicable. And it's that record has always sort of like stayed in my head. So but you hear that the format's kind of similar, right? Like we start at the climax, we stay at the climax. We're playing thrash, highly thrash influence, but we're playing blast beats the whole time. There's this gestures towards arena rock or whatever, but and it's about the devil. Speaking of which,
I love the like jacked devil on the cover. It's Jesus Christ.
I love his oppressive symmetry.
So Andy. All right, I'll do a sample. Okay, gotta get my bearings. This is the sample I'm about to play is fucking ridiculous. Like you can't do this shit. You know, you can't have your blasting black metal record and just tuck like Jester Race in Flames riffs into it. Like you can't fucking do that. How is that acceptable? They can't keep getting away with it. So, Gateways of Flesh and Blood, let's go and just be like, when you're asking, okay, is Children of Bodom like a serious influence here? Yes, it actually is.
This is the devil's revenge on Uwada.
You see, I saw you wrote that in the notes, but my thing is like, no, Uwada wants to be like cool and serious.
That's what I mean. Uwada wants to be cool and serious, and the way they try to distinguish themselves ends up accidentally being by writing these greasy cock rocker hooks which are the only thing that make them different from Migla, and are sort of like, they're like catchy, but in a way that's like profoundly objectionable, right? And just out of place with the whole vibe the band is going for, of like, oh, I'm serious face-covered man, right? This band has like 20 times the number of cock rocker hooks that Uada does, but they're in control of it, and they're laughing at them. And Uada is false black metal, and this is true black metal.
Well, this is like, I don't even know what to call this music anymore, because I swear to God, like, for the past couple weeks, I've had like the first few Sonata Arctica records basically on a loop in my car. And I can say that most of the riffs in that passage there sound way more like Sonata Arctica than they do fucking other black metal. Like,
no, that's true. That's true.
Like the sheer amount of just like aggressively florid power metal and melodeath across this record is awesome. Like it's so immediate. It's so absurd, and you're right, these guys are in such mastery of it, and the naked pleasure that they take in these sorts of ideas is like rejuvenating to me psychologically. It's like,
you know, I mean, it's a theme lately. We talked about it with Kaeck, we talked about it with Sorganazia. Like, you can just do that, right? Like, there's like certain melodic ideas are compelling and catchy for a reason. Okay, some of those riffs there, like da 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 da. I'm sorry, I fucked that up. Certain of those riffs, right? We've heard like billions of versions of before, right? But like, just you know, it's in the sequencing and it's in the delivery with the extreme intensity and the raw sound, right?
Well,
you can just do that.
And I think part of it is like the joy of it is so infectious. Like I've got a black metal band, and we have a song that I wrote and intended to just be a Sargeist ripoff, and every time we play it in the practice room, I'm like cackling between the verses. You know, it's like there's a whole part where it drops out and the other guitarist starts the main riff again, and before I come in and the blast beat comes in, I say, "Joyfully I die for Satan." It's like it's so fucking absurd. I love it, and this is like I get the same energy from these guys. Like,
I mean, the record. Oh, so like in terms of, is this a Girardi cover?
I
this
don't
looks
know.
Like a Paolo Girardi cover. And if so, it's like some of the best work he's done in. I think Paolo Girardi's had a renaissance. He's been he was supplanted by Warhead.
Looks like it was a guy named. Oh no, it's Joe Pitano.
Oh, okay. Well, a different Italian.
Yeah,
but it seems highly Girardian then. And it's fucking sick. And, you know, I mean, what is the cover? It's just like, wouldn't it be sick to be like the golden son of Satan and just like be a dude, but like a dragon dude, like crushing people and throwing them? It's like, yeah. And he's just like cackling.
you can tell the Monster Man is stoked about what he's doing.
He's so stoked.
He's not like grimly powerful. He's like laughing. It's like, yeah, look at me crush these people. This is sick. You know? I love crushing people. That's my favorite thing. You know.
Whoa, Dad! More people to crush? Thanks.
Fucking sick. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, fucking sick. All right. So this is the last, right? This record will make you feel like that guy.
Yes, it will.
And so, you know, definitely recommended for cranking a party up.
Yes. This is Metalhead. This is the record you play when all your metalheads get together for a house party. This is
how you just prepare for like property damage, right? Like,
yes.
Okay, so with that, the whole record. Where should I go for sample? It's we both decided that "Flaming Mouth of Baphomet" is like the track in terms of just being
it's
like
huge. It's huge, dude.
In terms of just like riff, in terms of the songwriting in terms of like the what you look for in like a I don't know, a different kind of black metal record, like in terms of like riff, and sort of dramatic, as you would say, narrative sequencing. This is the one that does it. It's just, so there's a lot of range stylistically here. We both wanted to sample from it, but like, because it's so sick, but you could also just sample from the end, and I could sample the end of Mortifier. What do you think?
Yeah, let's get more of this shit into the populace. we need to drive sales for this record. So, Flaming Mouth of Baphomet at the end. I don't even remember what happens here. I just wrote in all caps, "They can't keep getting away with it," like Sam Hyde style. So let's listen.
Whoa, wasn't he the guy who killed all those people?
He can't keep getting away with it. How many times can we play this 3-note lead sequence? This many times. It's like 32 times. Don't give a fuck. I love how there's that like break at the end before the last blast riff occurs, which is like the break at the end of like Blood for Blood's White Trash Anthem or something. It's like, what the fuck are we doing anymore? It's
a pile up. It's a pile-up.
It's a total pile-up, yeah.
Those lyrics are delivered, the rhythm, even with the screaming at the beginning, it's those are like hardcore, those are like tough guy hardcore or oi rhythms.
It's so good.
There's something about like the fucking swine in the lyrics. And yeah, then you get the gang vocal bit. Absolutely meant for singing along. And that kind of attention to these are retarded vocal rhythms, but they are very involved by black metal standards, right? Because black metal often, as we talk a lot, like, about it often, sure, it makes sense that vocals are de-emphasized in all sorts of black metal, but, like, that creates a trend where very often little effort is, even in aggressive black metal, where percussive vocal rhythm would help. The vocals are more just sort of like prolonged half note things or whole note things, right?
There's a lot of energy in the vocals on this show.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, even though the vocals are like, even though the lyrics I'm sure are just like super, just fun, simple stuff, you have to write the pattern. You have to write it to the guitar, and you just like have to come up with like enough and the right words, right? And even if it just takes a night of being on coke, right, it still is like a thing you got to do, and that a lot of bands don't bother doing. And partly that sort of like long drawn out sort of thing, right? That the habit of these kinds of vocals that work as texture is a reaction against sort of hardcoreism, right? But as we stress constantly on this show, all the original Norse bands were full of hardcoreisms. It's yeah. So you got anything more on that?
No, man. What have you got for Mortifer?
Okay, so, on the last Morgal, there were things that were, sounded a little more like Finn Black riffs, even if they were broken up into arpeggios. And there was this last song called War Cry of the Vampire, which is just, insane. Even though they just put out the full length, that's definitely still one of their best songs. And that's like them being like, okay, we're going to play a black metal song now. And it's got this kind of, but it's stompy and mid-tempo and rolling. And it's got this kind of Satanic War Master type riffing, but with Moonblood energy. Mm-hmm. Big Moonblood energy. I think Mortifier is the track that plays that role here. And it's so you'll hear more chord-based riffs. They're a little more elaborate and fleshed out harmonically. More of the Franco-Finnish riff style, but all within the very special Morgal framework. So let's start. I'm just gonna click. I just wrote end of in the notes, so let's just start 2 minutes before the end of Mortifier. Album of the year?
Yes.